Hi everyone, it's me again, Sharon Oyella, and today we're making a little Bigfoot lion. Today's tutorial's not like my normal tutorials where I walk you through every stitch of the pattern because I'm having a little bit of a time issue. I'm going to show you how to sew the doll together and also how to root the mane, how to attach and root the mane, and hopefully that'll get most of you through the pattern. And then in 2015 I'll come back, I'll redo the video, and it'll be a stitch-by-stitch tutorial. With that said, this is a little Bigfoot animal, and most of my little Bigfoots are all done the same way, kind of similar. The legs and the arms are similar. The heads will start off the same way, so you can check out the other little Bigfoot patterns if you need help. And I put that list of those patterns inside the pattern for this guy here. And you can pick up the written pattern on my blog, amigurumi2go.com, or hit the link in the description box below this video that you're looking at right now. So there's two ways you can do the mane. You can make a cap and attach the mane to the cap, or you can root the mane right to the head. Now you can see the big difference there. I think the rooting the mane onto the cap just turns out a little bit better. It hangs nicer, it's more fuller, and I think it's more handsome that way. But the choice is yours. This will take longer, but the results are worth it. This one, a little less full, but it still turns out just as nice. And remember, if you do make yourself a little Bigfoot lion, I'd love to see it. Please post pictures on my Facebook page, Amigurumi Freely. Thanks so much for watching, and have fun! Okay, before we start sewing the doll together, I want to add the nose onto the muzzle. And I made a smaller nose and a larger nose. And the difference is just how many rings I wrap the yarn around. So I'm just going to take a length of black yarn, just a length of black yarn, and I'm going to thread it through my yarn needle. And instead of pushing the end through the yarn needle, I'm risking fraying that yarn, I'm going to bend it over and push the bend through. Okay, and here's my muzzle here. And when I sew it onto the doll, I like having the yarn tail at the bottom, starting at the bottom. So I'm just going to bring the yarn needle right through the magic ring that I started off with, pull it through, just pull one yarn tail through and leave the other one hanging in the back. So for the smaller nose, I would just wrap the yarn around this magic ring here. And for the larger nose, I wrapped around the magic ring and the ring above it, the row above it. So I'm going to make the larger nose, so I'm just going to go right through and then back through that magic ring. I'm just going to make a V to start off with. It kind of gives me an idea how big I want the nose, or how wide I want the nose, and I'm just going to fill that in. So I'm just going to bend this right over and just start wrapping. And you wrap as many times as you'd like. So there we go. I wrapped quite a few times there. Now I just want to make the little line here, and that's all I'm going to do for the muzzle, and then I'm going to leave it. So what I can do is I can just bring this up to the top and then come up to the bottom in the middle, about 2 rings down, and make the little line. I can double up on that if I want to. And that's all there is to that. So now you just knot these 2 yarn tails in the back. Okay, now we'll add the frizz onto the tail. And I just got some strands of yarn, the same color I'm using for the mane. And I'm using a smaller hook now. Now this one's a 3.75. It doesn't really matter, as long as you can get your hook into the end of the tail and grab onto a strand of yarn. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave these yarn tails up here, is what's going to sew the tail to the body. So that's the top, and this is the bottom. And at the bottom, I'm just going to push through just like so, and I'm going to grab one of those strands of yarn and pull it through. And now I'm going to bring these 2 yarn tails through the loop. And I'm going to do that a few times here until I got a good bunch of yarn strands at the end. There we go, got a good bunch down there, and I'm going to just trim them up. Now I just fray the ends, so I just take a piece of one of the strands and I'm going to roll it in the opposite direction that it's actually been originally wrapped in, and then I'll just use my yarn needle and separate those fibers. See that it's wrapping this way? I'm going to roll it the opposite way. Kind of just loosens it up. Makes it easier for me to split them apart. So there's the finished tail, and it's ready for sewing. Okay, now we're ready to start assembling the doll, and the way I do it, it makes it the easiest way for assembling, is you start with the legs first, then the arms, the tail, then the muzzle, and then we're going to do the main part, this yarny cap here, at the very end. And we're going to do that together, of course. But what I'm going to do to save myself some filming is I'm going to insert a clip from a previous doll tutorial that shows you how to sew the legs on, and it's done the exact same way. There's no difference. This is a little Bigfoot animal, and all my little Bigfoot animals' legs and arms go on the same way. So I'll insert that clip. It'll show you how to sew on the legs, and then it'll show you how to sew on the arms. And what I do is I place the arms 2 rings down from the neck here is the best placement. So I'll let you sew on the arms and the legs, and then we'll come back and we'll do the tail together and we'll do the muzzle together. Once you get the first arm in, bring out the yarn tail on the back of the body and leave it hanging, because we're going to use it to knot off with the other one when we're done. So before you put the arm on the body, just make sure that the yarn tail is on the outside and on the corner. So just maneuver it. If it's sitting in the middle like this, just squish your arm and roll it over until it's on its corner. And then we're going to put it on the body, just underneath the head, just like that. So our first stitch, we're going to go from the outside going in, and we're just going to go right underneath the head, our first stitch, and bring it right out somewhere on the back of the body. Make sure you're going through a stitch hole and not piercing the stitches. So right through a stitch hole like that, bring it down and through. Go back in the same hole you just came out of and come right back up and go right underneath, and we're going to catch the edge of the stitches going through. Make sure you have 2 loops of that top stitch on top of your needle. So you're going right underneath that top stitch, bring your yarn through, and now we're going to go right back in and do the same thing, down and out through the back of the body. Okay, and now we're going to go right back in the same hole we just came out of and come up just underneath that stitch again, just like so. Pull it through, and then back down and out through the back of the body. Okay, and the top of the arm is sewn in. So to keep it from sticking up like that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back in the same hole we just came out of and come up just underneath the front of that arm, just in front of it. Pull it through, and then go back in and grab just the bottom stitch there, go back into the body and back out the back of the body. And pull it, and don't pull it so tight that you alter the shape of the arm. Just pull it so it pulls the arm down. And now we'll do the same thing on the back. Going in. And then back down. And now this time when we come out, we're going to come out right where the other yarn tail is coming out of. And there we go. Arms are sewn in, and that only took 5 stitches. If the doll is going to a small child, then you might want to put a couple more stitches in there just to make sure that it stays where it belongs. That's pretty in there, pretty tight though. You could yank on those arms and they won't come out, but if you're worried about it, you could add in a couple more stitches. Okay, now knot these 2 yarn tails off, and then thread them again. And now go back in the same hole that knot is and just bring it out somewhere else in the body. Bringing that knot into the body to hide it. And now we're going to pull on it slightly and cut. Okay, now we're sewing the legs in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a clip from a previous doll tutorial because the legs are sewn in exactly the same way. It's another Bigfoot animal. I've already sewed the first leg on, and I left the yarn tail hanging, and I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to knot it off at the other one when I'm done. So you just turn your doll upside down, make sure that the feet will be pointing in the right direction, of course, and we just pin the legs in place. Now I sew mine a little bit towards the back, so they have a nice belly in front of them, just like you can see here. They're sewn more to the back. You want to pin them both in place and make sure that there's room for both, or that they're centered. So just place it like that, and then just go around and put the pins in. Now I'm putting the pins a little bit on a slant because I'm going to be sewing around the bottom. So there we go. Good number of pins in there. So you just want to thread your yarn needle, and we're just going to go right in. Our first stitch is just going to go right down, and we're going to come out somewhere else away from that area. Just come through a stitch hole on the body. Now go right back in the same hole you just came out of, and underneath the leg, catching the bottom stitch. Just come through, and now go right back down into the body and out through a stitch hole somewhere away from that area, and then right back in where you just came out of. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to go right around the whole bottom edge of that leg, right underneath and through a stitch. Back down and out. Back in the same hole. Back down. I'm going to continue doing this all the way around so there's no gap. So that entire gap will be sewn down. Okay, so I put my final stitch in and I just checked and made sure there's no gaps anywhere. So I'm just going to bring this yarn tail now out where the other one is hanging. Bring it out through the same stitch hole. Knot them off. Thread them both. And then carry it in and away from that area to hide that knot into the body. Pull on them slightly. And okay, got the arms and legs on. Now I'm going to put on the tail. So I just threaded the yarn, one of the yarn tails with the yarn needle. And I'll just place it right on the back. It's right about there. So I'll just do a couple of whip stitches going into the body and back up into the tail. Just a couple will do. I'm going to do the last one. Before I pull the yarn tail all the way tight, I'll just go through that loop and then pull it tight. And that just knots it off. And then I can just bury the yarn tail into the body. Go in, pull the yarn tail through. Now I can do the same with the other one. So I just want the tail to stand out a little bit, so I'm just going to put another stitch underneath here. That kind of pulled the tail upward. Go through before pulling that tight, just go through that loop and then pull it tight. That just knotted it off. I'll just carry this yarn tail up where the other one is hanging. Knot them off. Cut them up a bit shorter and then push that knot into the body. Okay, now we're going to put the muzzle on. I just put a little stuffing in there. It might be easier for you if you sew the muzzle partially on and then stuff it. You can do it either way. I'll just push them in there. I'm going to put it onto the face. Now the top of the muzzle is going to be just on or just below the 12th row. And that is, we're going to find the 12th row just by counting the rings. And we're going to start with this ring that we started off with. That's row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So just below that. And the bottom of the muzzle will be just on or above row 17. So there was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. And I'm going to use lots of pins to hold it in place. More the better, and I'm just going to put them in on a slant so that I can sew around without hitting the shaft of the stick pin. Okay, there I go. Now I can just sew it into place. So I'm just going to bring the yarn needle right into the head, as close to the muzzle as I can get it. I'm just going to come out wherever it's comfortable for the needle to come through. Make sure you go through a stitch hole. Just bring it right through. Now go back into the same hole you just came out of. And I'll go on the side here. So I'll just stitch down all 4 sides so I can get that muzzle to stay put. You can see I just came through the head. And I'm just going to grab the bottom edge of the stitches there and go into the head and then back out somewhere where it's comfortable for the needle to come through. So now I'll just go back into the same hole I just came out of, and I'm going to do the top. I just came through the head and through the top edge of the muzzle. Go back in, as close to the muzzle as I can get it, and back out somewhere away from that area. So 3 sides are sewn in. Now I'll do this other side. Okay, now I just came up underneath the muzzle, or right beside it, doesn't matter. As long as you get as close to the muzzle as you can get it. Now grab the bottom edge of the stitch and go back into the head and out and away. So those 4 sides are sewn in. So I stitched the bottom, the top, and the sides, and make sure everything's still centered, everything looks good. And if you need to, you can repin it. And if not, you just go back in the same hole you just came out of, and now I'm just going to sew in the rest of the muzzle. So same steps, just going all the way around. And if you need to now, you can sew around, leave a little opening, and you can push in some stuffing with the back end of a pencil or a stuffing stick and stuff the muzzle that way. Okay, once it's all sewn in, there's no gaps left. We can just knot this off. I'm just going to carry it up as close as I can to the muzzle. Just grab a stitch, wrap around it. There we go. And before pulling that loop all the way, just bring my yarn needle through it and then pull tight, and that just knots it off. Now you can just bring the yarn tail anywhere out away from that area, pull on it slightly, and cut. And just shape the muzzle. Okay, we're almost ready to start doing the main part, but we're going to sew the ears on first. What I do is I just fold the ear flat and then fold it in half, and I'm just going to sew the bottom edge together. Just a couple of stitches will do, just to hold it closed. And that's all there is to that. And then we're going to sew it to the cap before we sew the cap to the head. So we're just going to place this on, and you can put the ears anywhere you want to. I just put mine almost in line with the eyes. You can see here. I think they look pretty cute that way, and they face forward, quite forward, so I'm going to sew them in about 2 rows back from this edge here, this outer edge, with about 7 or 8 visible stitches in between them. I'm just counting stitch holes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, so right about there. So it doesn't take much to hold it in place, just a few stitches back and forth through the ear and then through the cap. So there we go. Now we can just knot this off here. Just go through, and before pulling that all the way through, just go through that loop and pull it tight. Now I can just bring it through, stitch like that, and then we're going to cut it free. And there we go. Okay, now I'm going to thread this yarn tail, the cap yarn tail. And I'm going to place it on the head, making sure the muzzle is centered between the ears. Right about there. And then the back of the cap is going to go right to the bottom of the neck there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the head's tucked in there nicely. The cap is nice and snug. And I'm just going to sew this edge to the head. I'm not going to make any stitches in this area here. I want this cap to be free of stitches. So I'm just stitching down the outer edge of the cap. And I'm going to go along the whole outer edge. You can see I'm not worried about getting them side by side. I just, every 4 or 5 stitches will do. So there we go, the cap is firmly stitched down, and none of the stitches are in this area here, just on the outer edge. So now I can just leave that, so I can just leave this yarn tail hanging. Okay, now we need to start rooting in the yarn, and we do that strand by strand, and it's going to take a little while, but the results are worth it. So I'm just going to take the yarn, find the end of it here, and I'm just going to wrap it around my hand, just like this. And I'm going to wrap and wrap and wrap a big bundle there. And you're going to do this a few times throughout the rooting of the hair. Just want to get a good bundle started. So I'm going to take it off my hand, and I'm just going to cut through, right through the middle. So there I have a nice pile of yarn strands. So now I'm going to take the yarn, just like this, and I'm going to start on the outer edge here. And I'm going to go, for this first row, I'm going to go through the head and up through the cap. And that's just for the outer row. So I'm just connecting the head and the cap together. Pull the yarn through, and then pull those 2 yarn tails through the loop. And you're going to do this all the way around the whole edge, side by side. And like I said, this part does take a while. Pull it through, pull the yarn strands through that loop, and pull it tight. Okay, I made it all the way around. I attached the head to the cap that way, just by pushing my hook through the head and then through the edge of the cap, all the way around. You can see I went side by side. So by the time you're done this edge part, you will know if these strands were too short. If they're too short to work with, if you find it's taking too long to work the yarn tails through the loop once you get it through the head, then just make the yarn strands longer just by wrapping this a little bit looser. You can wrap it looser. Longer strands are easier to work with. I find doing this length here, just wrapping around the 4 fingers, saves me on yarn, and it's a good length for me. But if it's too short for you, then definitely make them longer. So now that I've got the 1 row done, I'm just going to start on the next row. And again, just going to go right through the cap. But now I'm not going through the head, I'm just going through the cap itself. And I'm going to work my way around the entire edge, just like I did for the first row. But instead of going through the head, I'm just going through the cap. And you will get a rhythm going, and you'll find that you'll pick up in speed once you get used to this part. So you can see I'm just going side by side, and I'm going to go right around, and I'm going to do that for every row. Okay, I got about an hour and 20 minutes into this, and I've just got this much left to do. that was an hour and 20 minutes. I didn't take any breaks, so you can see it does take a while. And I did all around the ears, made sure to get all around there. Every stitch has been rooted. And you'll notice that as you're going along, the top of the cap will start to stretch out a little bit, and it gets a little bit wrinkly. Now it's not going to affect anything, but if it is bothering you and you want to tack it down, every once in a while you can go through. Instead of just rooting through the cap, you can push right through to the head and then pull the strand through the cap and the head, and that just tacks down that part of the cap. It's not going to make that much of a difference, but if it is bothering you, you can do that. I've done about 4 or 5 of these stitches through the head. And so I realized that we don't need this long strand for sewing anymore. We can just cut that free. Okay, 20 more minutes and I've completely covered in the whole cap. So now you can find the center of the cap where we started with that loop in the middle. And you'll notice if you push it in, the hair is going to sit a little bit better. So I'm just going to tack that part down. It's going to make a hole in the middle, but that's okay. So I'm just going to take one of my strands here and push right into the head. And then I'll tack it down with one of these strands. There we go. So you see it kind of just makes it sit a little nicer. Okay, now I'm going to start trimming up the hair, and I'm going to do this part very, very slowly because I don't want to spend all that time I just did rooting the hair and then to end up cutting it too short. Now, there'll be different lengths. In the front's shorter, and we're going to leave the back a little bit longer. And you can do any style you want. This is just a suggestion. So I cut, I don't know how high that is, some areas just 1 inch long in the front, and then other areas 1.5 inches in the middle between those ears, 1.5 inches, 2 inches. So I'm just going to cut around the front area first. Now you notice I got a bag here because it's going to get quite messy if you don't have something to catch all this yarn, because you're going to be cutting quite a bit of it away. Again, I want to do this very slowly and cut a little bit at a time. Now I know the front is going to be quite a bit shorter, so I'm not too worried about the front right now. There we go. Now the same for the other side. Okay, so the front is going to get shorter yet, but you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to do little bits at a time, and I'm going to stop. I'm going to keep stopping and looking to make sure I'm not cutting too much off. So I'll just do the front, and then I'll come back and show you how far I've gotten. So you can see I've got quite a bit more cutting to do here. So I'm just going to start shaping in the front first. I'm going to cut all in the front, a little bit shorter. Right in front of the ears, like you'll notice on this guy here, right in front of the ears, I cut down to about 1 inch long. And then in the middle of the ears I left a little bit longer. And then I just trimmed away and started shaping towards the back. Now the back I wanted to have a little bit of a V shape. Okay, I took quite a bit of time and carefully cut as I went along. Now this is the one I was just working on, and this is the one I did a few days ago. And you can see it's not as nice. I think I rushed through that one just a little bit. And also I noticed that if you do push in the top of the cap, right in the back here, if it's sticking out, if you push it in towards the head and you tack it down, that yarn sits a little bit nicer. So just like this one that we did before we started cutting. So, and then you can cut it short if you want it short, or leave it long. So I think that this guy here looks a little bit more handsome than this one here. Although they're both keepers, I think. But definitely take your time as you're cutting. And as you're cutting, make sure you don't cut through the tail. And give the head a shake like this. every once in a while, and you'll see certain strands will pop out that are really, really long. Just give it a good shake, and then continue cutting. And take a break if you need to as well. You don't want to get scissor happy, because once you start cutting too much, then you can't get that back on unless you reroute the hair. So, okay, so now we'll stick the yarn strands in this area here to fill in underneath the face. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing here. I've filled in quite a bit. I left them uncut so you can see. So that's quite a bit here, and I'm rounding it out so it'll shape around the face. So I'll do the same on this side. I'll come around and I'll fill all this area in here, all this area, and round it out to shape the face. And I think here I'll probably put about 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of yarn right through here. So there he is, all done. You can see I rooted directly to the face, and I made sure to fill in every bare spot that I could see. I even doubled up on some areas just so there wouldn't be any bare spots noticeable. And I put a lot in there, took my time, and gave it a good trim. Now you can see, if you take your time, that the haircut will look a lot nicer. Like this guy here, he's still pretty handsome, but he's a little bit more choppy because I rushed through this one a little bit more. I wasn't really thinking it would make that much of a difference, but you can see the big difference there. Choppy over here. And there's a little more layered look here. So I think this is better to take your time, and the results are worth it. Take a break when you need it to, and then come back to it. You'll be happy that you took your time. Okay, all that's left now is the eyes. Now, I show different ways how to do the eyes, and I actually put a couple of tutorials together, and I made them into one clip. And these are all little Bigfoot animals. Here's French knot eyes. Here's painted eyes. You can also do buttons or felt, or you can glue in safety eyes like I've done. These are just glued in. So what I'll do is I'll insert that clip and I'll show you all the options that are available for adding in the eyes. Okay, now we're going to do the eyes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a few different options here. I'm going to show you how to do the safety eye with the felt behind it. I'm going to show you how to do the French knot and then paint in a little bit of white there. And then I'm also going to show you on a separate piece to do the French knot and then add in the white with yarn. So I wanted to do it this way so you can see how to add the French knot actually to the elephant instead of just on a flat piece. So I'm going to do both things during the tutorial. And I'm also going to throw in a clip from a previous doll tutorial that shows you how to do painted eyes. Now, I didn't paint any of the eyes for the elephant, but that choice is also available. So I'll throw that clip in there as well, and also how to add in an eyebrow. So let's get started on all that good stuff. Okay, and one more idea is buttons. I'm not throwing that one in this tutorial, but you can hit that link, and I have a tutorial here on YouTube that'll show you how to add buttons after your doll has been stuffed and closed, and how to thread a button and all that good stuff. So you can just hit that link, and that's another option as well. So I just wanted to show you real quick. Here's the elephant with the felt behind the eyes, and here's one without the felt. So I think both ways are very cute. And then the French knot. So lots of options available for eyes. These are French knot, and these ones are safety eyes, and all I did was I cut out some felt, cut out 2 pieces of felt, and then put a little slit in them, and for the safety eye to go through. Now I glue mine in. I don't use the backs on my safety eyes, and I find that gluing them in works just great. So I just put the glue on the stem. Before you push it down, just make sure that the felt is going in the direction you want it to, and then push it in place. So that's one option. You don't have to put the felt behind them. I just find that it gives a little bit more life to the eye itself. And just make sure that you don't put so much glue on that it oozes out the front, because once you have glue on yarn, it's very difficult to get off. And once this glue is dry, It's really, really strong, this type of glue. And if you need any more glue in the back, then just use something like a toothpick or something and just run the glue behind there. And that should hold it down just fine. So there's one option. Okay, so for the French knot eyes, what I did was make sure to mark off exactly where you want the eyes. Like, try it out with stick pins first. So you just want to make sure that you're going through a post and that those are even on each side, that you're going through a post. That's where your needle is going to come up through. You need to go through a post and pierce the fibers instead of going through a stitch hole. So that's, we're going to be using a pointed end needle here. So I've already got the one in. So this one is marking off exactly where the other one was. So I just went through the side. And when you bring your needle through, make sure you're piercing the post. Just like so. Now you don't need that anymore. Bring it through. Bring one yarn tail through and leave the other one hanging. Okay, and all you do is wrap the yarn around the end of that needle. I wrap 3 times. There was once, twice, 3 times. And bring it over through the post again, not in the same hole you just came out of, but just over a little bit, or just above a little bit. Go in, and then bring it out, bring the needle out through where the other one is, the other yarn tail is hanging, and pull it through. There we go. And now I shaped this one a little bit, so I just went back in. So I just want to grab this little bit here, just running my needle through it, and I'm going to bring my needle right where I want that yarn to go. And back out. So there we go, a little bit more of a shape that I wanted. And then I just bring the yarn tails out like I've done with all the other yarn tails and then cut them away. Okay, and then what I did then was just take a toothpick with a little bit of white acrylic paint and just dot it in there. And then once it's all dry, you can cut away those little fibers that are sticking up. Okay, so there's my French knot with painted in white, and I know many of you are going to want to try it with just yarn. So I'm going to redo the French knot here on a separate piece. Threaded my black yarn. I'm going to bring it up through the back using a pointed needle again and piercing the fibers. Pull the yarn through and leave the one yarn tail hanging in the back. And now I'm going to wrap the yarn around my tip of my needle 3 times. Now bring that needle right beside where I came through and down through the back. And again, I like to go through that French knot and kind of shape it a bit with my yarn. So I just came through it. Grab some of that yarn and go right back down. There we go. It kind of just flattens out the French knot instead of it just sitting up. And you have something there to work with. And now thread our white yarn. Just need a short length. And we're just going to come up through the French knot and then right back down beside where we came through. So that looks pretty good too. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to paint the eyes on, and today I went down and was going to buy some fabric paint. Like, there was 4 in a package and it was like $15 or something like that, and all I wanted was a little bit of black paint. So I didn't want to spend that kind of money just for the little bit of paint that I needed. So this is what I use for my dolls. I use acrylic craft paint. Now, I don't know how that will wash up in the wash machine if you need to wash the toy quite often. So I'm going to show you how to do it with the paint, and then you decide if you want to get the fabric paint or not. But this works just fine for me, so that's what I'm going to use. And I'll just show you, and then you decide. Okay, so all I did is I shook this up, and I'm just going to use whatever paint's in the lid there. And I'm using a pointed pencil. A needle works just fine too. Like I did one of mine the other night with the end of my yarn needle, and then I just washed the needle off. Okay, so these are markers. So you just want to mark off where you want the eyes to go. Okay, so I'm just started on the one. I actually ditched my pencil and I'm just using the end of my yarn needle. You want to start off very, very small. Very, very light. And just start with a little bit like that. And you just want to keep building it up. The slower you go, the better. And as little as you can use, the better. Because you don't want to go in aggressively, because with paint you could end up messing up your whole project. And this way, if you start small and you decide, oops, I don't want to do that, you can use felt or a French knot or whatever you need to cover it up. I'm just building little bits as we go here. And if you come across an area that you can't get paint on it because it's just kind of like a dip, then just use your needle and pull the fibers up. Just pull the fibers up. And just move that fiber around in there until you got the surface that you want. Okay, now I'm just adding in the white, and I'm using just a stick pin. Just get a good blob on the end there. And if you feel like you put too much white on, don't worry about that, because once it's dry, you can cover whatever you need to up with the black paint again, or even a black Sharpie works great too. Okay, and if you want to add something like an eyebrow or eyelashes or whatever, just take your thread and bring it through somewhere on the side of the head and come up where you want the start of whatever you're putting in. We're just going to put in an eyebrow here. And just pull it through and leave the one yarn or the one thread tail hanging. Okay, and then you just wrap it, whatever you're making, just put it all in. So I think I wrapped this 3 times, so I will wrap it 3 times. So there we go. So once I'm happy with whatever I'm doing, then just go back in and out where the other thread tail is. And remember, nothing is permanent when you're working with thread and yarn. You can always pull it out and do it all over again. It doesn't matter. So if you're not happy with what you got, then start over. So now I will knot these off and then carry the knot inside the head and cut them free like I've done on all the previous. So that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you had fun, and I hope you got yourself a little Bigfoot lion made. And remember, if you made a lion, please post pictures on my Facebook page, Amigurumi Freely. Thanks so much for watching, and see you soon!